In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Adorable Will, I want to pray these titles, but I am unable to do it. Come and do it with me, and I'll do everything well. Jesus and Mary, I thank you and I esteem you, one with Louisa, creature who the triune God leaves their life in order to conserve what they have done. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter, whose littleness in the interminable sea of the divine volition is the triune God's greatest joy. Louisa, one who emits concurrent, assisting, and receiving acts with the same acts of her Creator. Louisa, who lives in the divine will and is inseparable from it. Louisa, who concurs with the multiplicity and incessant operation of her Creator's works. Louisa, one who breaks the triune God's solitude and whose current they feel in their divine sea. Louisa, who acquires the rights of the divine volition to do what it does. Louisa, who receives by right the infinity of the triune God's love and works. Louisa, whose offerings of actions are posts that she takes in the divine will. Louisa, who the divine strength continuously enraptures. Louisa, one who lives in the height of the divine volition, who has at her disposition the triune God's receiving act. Louisa, who puts the infinity of God's love and his works at the triune God's disposition and that of the creatures. Louisa, Intermediary, who with the power of the divine Fiat wants to bind heaven and earth. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his volition. Louisa, one who feels the divine volition calling her into the power, wisdom, love, mercy, justice, goodness, and divine beauty of the Supreme Being. Louisa, the Supreme Being's beloved creature to whom they make continuous calls. Louisa, one who is the repairer of the rip from the divine qualities. Louisa, who has the rights to love Jesus. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, one whose works, acts, adorations, and love towards God are done and formed within eternity. Louisa, one whose works, acts, adorations, and love remain forever confirmed in works, adorations, divine and perennial love. Louisa, whose works can be called works of the creature transfused in God, in which God Himself has operated. Louisa, one who is looked at by the triune God not in time but in eternity, and for their decorum and honor. Louisa, whose acts are coined with the image of her Creator. Louisa, who Jesus always awaits in order to meet her, to extend His arms to her, and to keep with her in sweet conversation, to manifest to her the ancient secrets of His supreme Fiat. Louisa, Jesus' good daughter, in whom He harmonized the kingdom of His divine will. Louisa, to whom Jesus gave His first lessons, to deposit in her soul the power and work of His Fiat. Louisa, who has the gold thread of light in her power. Louisa, who has the Creator operating in her act. Louisa, who has eternity in her power. Louisa, creature in whom the divine will has its prime and operating act. Louisa, fortunate disciple who possesses the value and the merit of the work of her teacher. Louisa, possessor of the triune God's same acts. Louisa, owner of Jesus' sacramental life. Louisa, owner of all of Jesus' works. Louisa, who has Jesus' works in her power. Louisa, who has the celestial Mama's acts in her power. Jesus and Mary, I esteem you and I honor you, one with Louisa, who has the acts of the souls who live of divine will in her power. Louisa, who can give Jesus everything. Louisa, who forms Jesus' contentment and his traffic of love. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, creature who holds everything in her power and can do everything. Louisa, creature to whom the Supreme Being surrenders their works, their steps, their love for as much as is possible for a creature. Louisa, who has the triune God's love in her power and can love them as much as they love themselves. Louisa, who has the triune God's works in her power to glorify them. Louisa, who has the triune God's steps in her power to tread in the same way they tread in seeking creatures, to conduct them all before their adorable majesty. Louisa, creature who the Supreme Being feels walking together with them in the steps of all, in the works of each one, and who loves them in the heartbeat of every heart. Louisa, the Supreme Being's loyal follower who hides them in her littleness and gives her life for theirs, for their defense. Louisa, the divine will's happy prey. Louisa, Jesus' little newborn. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, who undergoes a divine fecundity in her act that forms the divine seed in her act. Louisa, in whose act one sees the sweet enchantment of her Creator. Louisa, one who operates in the divine will, who is source from which the fount can boast that its water never ends and can give water to whoever wants it without ever drying up. Louisa, one who is fecund earth, and its meadows are always in bloom. Louisa, one who has the sun at her disposition, that lets her drink large sips of light, of sweetness, of sanctity, of invincible patience, of heroism, and of sacrifice. Louisa, who gives the large field to all created things to repeat her act. Louisa, little atom that enters into the divine volition and becomes powerful over everything. Louisa, who sweetly feeds her act to everyone in order to make her Creator loved. Louisa, creature who moves everything. Louisa, creature who makes her voice run in all things. Louisa, creature who invests, reigns, and makes all things invested by the Fiat. Say what she wants. Louisa, the commander over all creation. Louisa, creature whose littleness runs in the triune God's immensity. Louisa, she alone comes from earth to break the triune God's solitude. Louisa, the only all-doer who wants to move all things to love. Bless and thank the triune God. Louisa, who lives in the triune God, and they live in her, and form one single will. Louisa, daughter in whom the divine will consumes with its light in order to form its divine copy. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his volition. Louisa, in whose love Jesus triumphs, and she triumphs in Jesus' love. Louisa, Jesus' dearest daughter. Louisa, whose love takes the form of a refreshing little flame that coming into Jesus' great fire of love brings him refreshment. Louisa, whose sing songs of I love yous are many outpourings to Jesus that call him to rest in her soul. Jesus and Mary, I honor you and I cherish you, one with Louisa, little daughter of Jesus' will. Louisa, whose every I love you is a little firewood that she casts into the immense ocean of Jesus' love, converting into a little flame, increases love a degree more for her anguishing Jesus. Louisa, new life in Jesus' divine will. Louisa, Jesus' little newborn. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter. Louisa, who receives a new act of divine life. Louisa, reborn in the new act. Louisa, to whom Jesus gives the gift of new divine life in his volition. Louisa, who feels in herself the continuous growth and rebirth of her life in the divine. Louisa, reborn to new divine life. Louisa, in whom the divine volition's celestial and balsamic air formed heaven. Louisa, who can make new conquests and can enclose in her act an operating divine will. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, fortunate creature, who Jesus feels with him in everyone and everything. Louisa, over whose destiny Jesus rests. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, every particle of her being takes place in the Supreme Being. Louisa, creature who the triune God repours over all their divine being with all their acts. Louisa, creature in whom the triune God hides themselves, wall themselves inside. Louisa, one who possesses the divine will, on whose part the triune God receives the glory, honor, love of their own life and of all their acts. Louisa, beloved creature, who the triune God is grateful to because she has given them the field of making use of their communicative power to produce themselves in her. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, who acquires many rights in the sea of the divine Fiat. Louisa, who navigates in the immense sea of the divine volition in the depth of her soul. Louisa, the divine will's little ship that goes on vacation in the immense sea of its volition. Louisa, who encloses new doses of divine will. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, whose I love you unites to the divine punctuation. Louisa, who knows the value of the celestial handwriting on the divine page of creation. Louisa, who learned to read the divine page. Louisa, who understands with exact ideas what the triune God has done for her love. Louisa, who receives the most beautiful and moving expressions of her Creator. Louisa, who gives the triune God the little tribute, pays them the little income that they await with love and justice from the creature. Louisa, whose little light of I love you Jesus puts on the triune God's divine punctuation. Louisa, the little daughter of Jesus' divine volition, whose punctuation is united to the divine punctuation. Louisa, on whose page and handwriting of life Jesus places his celestial punctuation. Louisa, who possesses the divine will as foundation of everything. Louisa, with whose heart Jesus places his life in communication. Jesus and Mary, I cherish you and I love you, one with Louisa, in whom Jesus leaves the deposit of his virtues. Louisa, in whom Jesus leaves the deposit of the fruit of his sacrifices. Louisa, in whom Jesus leaves the deposit of the participation of his life. Louisa, who Jesus chose for his residence. Louisa, who Jesus chose for the hiding place of his pains. Louisa, who Jesus chose as a place of his refuge. Louisa, from whom Jesus feels reciprocated for the sacrifice of his Eucharistic life. Louisa, who breaks Jesus' loneliness for him. Louisa, who dries Jesus' tears. Louisa, who gives Jesus the freedom of letting him pour out his love and his sorrows. Louisa, who serves Jesus as living species. Louisa, the soul whose life develops with Jesus' life. Louisa, who with Jesus beats with one single heartbeat. Louisa, to whom Jesus communicates his pains and in whom he continues his passion. Louisa, with whom Jesus continues his life on earth. Louisa, poor creature who feels drowned in Jesus' love and by his graces. Louisa, in whom Jesus' sacramental life is reproduced, bilocated, and continued. Louisa, Jesus' conqueror. Louisa, in whom Jesus' sacramental life remains at its place of honor. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, of whose field of will Jesus makes a beautiful flowery meadow, a garden of his delights. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his volition. Louisa, to whom Jesus manifested the truths of his divine will. Louisa, the soul in whom Jesus formed the support and the place where his truths must descend. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, bearer to her God of joys and happinesses. Louisa, Jesus' good daughter. Louisa, in whose depth of soul the celestial farmer put forth so many seeds of celestial truths, the whole world will be filled by the harvest. Louisa, whose earth Jesus found in order to cast his seed. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' good daughter. Louisa, blessed daughter. Louisa, one who calls Jesus' acts and unites herself together with him. Louisa, one who, on the stake of Jesus' same sacrifice and his love, sacrifices herself to obtain the great good that the divine will would be known and would dominate the human volition. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter. Louisa, Jesus' good daughter. Louisa, who can say, I am will of God? Jesus and Mary, I love you and glory to my Creator. One with Louisa, who is garment that hides the divine will. Louisa, who the eternal Fiat waited for, wanting her together in the creating act. Louisa, little daughter of Jesus' volition. Louisa, confirmed in the act that the Fiat is doing. Louisa, creature for whose love alone Jesus is always operating. Louisa, who remains together with the triune God, loving and operating. Louisa, who gives the triune God the little exchange in order to let their love find its outlet and its happiness on the part of the creature. Louisa, the soul who remains confirmed and bound in the Fiat's divine acts. Louisa, the repeater of Jesus' life. Louisa, the one who listens to Jesus and takes everything God has done in the creation and redemption. Louisa, who forms her life together with the triune God. Louisa, in whose acts the divine acts flow. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his will. Louisa, dearest daughter. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, good daughter. Louisa, person who Jesus loves and forms another life of his inside of her. Louisa, in whom the divine will formed the great prodigy of enclosing God's divine life in the little circle of her soul. Louisa, who feels the life of the divine will alive and palpitating in her. Louisa, the divine volition's daughter. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, creature placed in the immense suns of the divine attributes, which line up to the right and left of her. Louisa, who nourishes herself with light. Louisa, who the light embellishes and who does not know how to speak of anything but light. Louisa, creature who the divine attributes press themselves around and love as the pupil of their eyes. Louisa, whose life the divine attributes feel in themselves and their life in her. Louisa, who the divine attributes raise as beautiful. Louisa, the little way in the divine will. Louisa, whose sojourn in the acts that the Supreme Being did in creation are welcomed by Jesus. Louisa, to whom Jesus narrated the story of the triune God's love that they had in the creation and all the rest they had done toward creatures. Louisa, the outlet of the triune God's love. Louisa, the little secretary of the story of creation. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his volition. Louisa, who can do no less than always keep present all the acts done by the divine will. Louisa, in whom the divine will has all its acts with all the order it had in creating them. Jesus and Mary, I glorify you and I praise you, one with Louisa, who follows the divine acts in order to unite herself to them, to do what the divine will itself has done. Louisa, to whom the divine will gives the cord to take all the triune God's works. Louisa, God's clock who, winding the cord, marks the minutes and hours of God's works. Louisa, who has the good of knowing all the hours of the day of God's divine will. Louisa, to whom the divine will gives itself completely, whole with the fullness of its light, sanctity, power, and its works. Louisa, one who acquired the terrain of heaven. Louisa, creature who in every act of divine will takes heaven and enlarges her celestial properties. Louisa, with whom Jesus sewed together the most beautiful virtues. Louisa, creature in whom Jesus forms his sojourn. Louisa, creature in whom Jesus forms his refuge. Louisa, creature in whom Jesus forms his delights. Louisa, in whom Jesus experiences more pleasure in remaining in the heaven of this creature than in heaven with the saints, because he can labor in it. Louisa, in whom Jesus can make new acquisitions. Louisa, in whom Jesus can receive new love. Louisa, the heaven where Jesus forms the most beautiful works. Louisa, the heaven where Jesus forms the most artistic and new inventions. Louisa, the heaven where Jesus communicates the highest and the most profound sciences. Louisa, the heaven where Jesus forms living statues. Louisa, terrestrial heaven who serves as new surprise and contentment for the whole celestial court. Louisa, prime material for Jesus to develop his divine labors. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, triumpher, who is pointed out to all the celestial court. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, one who lives in heaven. Louisa, one who acquires light by nature. Louisa, little daughter of Jesus' will. Louisa, inseparable from the divine will. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, she who unites herself with the divine acts, who the divine being invests with new love. Louisa, she who loves the triune God with new love and forms her ways of love for her Creator. Louisa, creature who has her little place of love in the divine being, and they have their place of love in her. Louisa, one who places the triune God's love in safety. Louisa, Jesus' little daughter of his volition. Louisa, to whom Jesus manifested so many truths about his divine will. Louisa, to whom Jesus gave the gift of the divine will's operating life in her. Louisa, dearest daughter of Jesus' divine will. Louisa, one who lives under the reign of the miracles of divine volition. Louisa, one who possesses in herself the fount, source that transforms the creature into the miraculous virtue of divine will. Jesus and Mary, I praise you and I thank you, one with Louisa, in whom one sees the miracle of invincible patience. Louisa, in whom one sees the miracle of perennial love toward God. Louisa, in whom one sees the miracle of continuous prayer without ever tiring. Louisa, in whom, if one sees pains, they are miracles of conquests, triumphs, glory that she encloses in her pains. Louisa, one who the divine will gives the miracle of divine heroism. Louisa, in whose pains the divine will places the infinite weight and value. Louisa, in whom the divine will places the imprint, the seal of the pains of her Jesus. Louisa, gift of everything that God did in creation and redemption. Louisa, who comes to deposit everything before the divine throne. Louisa, bearer of the triune God's works. Louisa, who with so much love passes from one act of the triune God to another in creation and redemption. Louisa, happy creature who takes everything. Louisa, who pours herself into Jesus, even her littleness, her little volition. Louisa, who possesses the strength of the union between her and the triune God. Louisa, one whose strength, value, beauty, sanctity remains in the unique and united strength with her Creator. Louisa, Jesus' blessed daughter. Louisa, one who possesses the divine will, in who the divine will forms the living paradise. Louisa, who the divine will extends its arms to, conduct her in its arms into the same knowledge it has manifested to her. Louisa, whose soul the divine will molds, producing in her the life, the goods that its knowledge possesses. Louisa, daughter into whom the divine will pours itself. Louisa, who acquires science and reason. Louisa, to whom the holy volition gave the state of divine royalty. Louisa, daughter of the great king whose property is the royalty. Louisa, daughter of Jesus' heart, who remains in the arms of the divine will. Louisa, one who places herself at the disposal of the triune God, and they place themselves at her disposal. Louisa, one who undergoes the divine will's creating act in hers. Louisa, to whom Jesus gives his divine nourishment. Louisa, in whom the life of Jesus' word forms the divine life. Louisa, in whom the light of Jesus' word illuminates her. Louisa, in whom the fire of Jesus' word makes the heat rise in her. Louisa, in whom the food of Jesus' word nourishes her. Louisa, who forms the intelligence of Jesus' will in her mind. Louisa, who forms the life of the divine will's actions in her hands. Louisa, who forms the divine step in her feet. Louisa, whose will acts as veil and hides the extraordinary action of a God. Louisa, hidden actor of God's divine actions. Louisa, whose ordinary actions form the chain of the extraordinary actions of God in her soul. Louisa, in whom the divine will forms the fullness of its sanctity.
You have reached the end of day 28 of the titles of Louisa. Fiat.